Hello, and welcome to our new stream for class 1. There were some technical difficulties with the previous stream, so I've decided to re-record this one, and I've added some extra slides and some answers to questions that have been asked to me after the first session was completed. So I thought I'll answer these for anyone who is going to rewatch these at a later point in time, so that you will get these questions answered right away. All right. So let's get started um, with what are we trying to do with Humble Devs? So uh, what we're trying to do with Humble Devs is get you to build a SaaS. So SaaS stands for Software as a Service, which is basically going to be an application that you want to create, whether this is for your own use, for use with your family and friends, or something that you want to monetize and sell at some point in the future, right? And this is going to be something that we're going to build during the 12-week period. We're going to focus on a minimum viable product, so something that you can actually launch online that has the least amount of functionality that you can think of to make it usable. And then you can, after that point, you can basically continue building it at your own pace, right? So to start with that, let me bring you to the humble-devs.com website, where I've listed out some reasons why I initially even thought about doing this course. Because I've had over the years many people come up to me and asking me what is a good course to follow online, something that they can use to start learning, start building something. And unfortunately, a lot of these people really don't stick with it for too long. And the most common reason for that is that people either get lost. So at some point, there will be a topic that will be covered that they find a bit too complex. And there isn't enough guidance being provided within whatever platform they're using to learn at that point. And they kind of just think this might not be for me, this may be too difficult, and they drop it. Or most commonly, they will start by building something on a website like FreeCodeCamp, for example, which is a really great resource to get you started. However, when you're asked to all of a sudden move away from doing everything on the website, so you're giving small snippets of code that you're writing out or copy pasting, and you're trying things out and you're immediately seeing the result of it, people will then at some point have to transition from doing everything on the website itself to building something on their own computer. And this is also a jump that a lot of people find just leaves them in this kind of place where they don't know what to do. They download the code editor and then they look up some videos and immediately see that there is quite a lot of configuration that goes into this. Or whoever is doing the tutorial is also using a whole bunch of other tools, and then it just kind of becomes too complex for them. And they're like, okay, maybe this is not for me. Maybe I kind of underestimated the complexity of building something using software. And then most of them end up dropping. And at the end of the day, if we look at metrics, so Harvard X and MIT X have both published some articles stating that from their online courses, only about 3 to 6% of people that actually enroll into courses complete them, which is of course a very low number. And for most online coding courses, the number is also around 10%, so it's not much better. All right. And therefore, the Humble Devs were trying to build something immediately without learning too much of like the code base itself or the languages. And after we're done, so after the 12 weeks, and you've created a small application that is fully functional, that you can launch, that has all of the features that will make it a modern application, like login, using a database, it using a modern framework. You can then choose after the 12-week period, do you want to focus more on maybe getting a job with your newfound skills? or do you want to continue building your product, or maybe build a different product that you want to launch? And for both of these, I'll be providing guidance and further live streams to kind of cater to both audiences, right? You can visit the website and read the rest of all of this information here. One other thing that I want to touch upon is the journey. So what are we going to cover during the 12-week journey? We're going to start in a bit with a couple of slides that will explain the fundamentals of the building blocks that we're going to use. All right. Because I mean, a lot of people are seeing videos online nowadays of like, yeah, you can just vibe code, or you can just, how do I put it? Just ask AI to create the app of your dreams, and like within no time, it will create it for you. Unfortunately, that is not real. It doesn't create an app for you that's maintainable, that is built with any kind of like deliberate thought or choices. And this is where we have to come in and make these decisions at the start. So we're starting with building the foundations of our knowledge. So when you want to build a modern web application, you're going to have to understand a bit of how the web works. So what are you actually building, for whom, how do they access that information? And for that, we're going to look at the fundamentals of the client server model. All right. After that, we're going to dive into learning a bit of HTML. Again, we're focusing more on the 20% that you actually need to achieve the 80% of the application that you want. And the remaining of the 20% that's left, that's something that we're going to have to pick up as we go, and research things, troubleshoot things, because that's going to be a very big part of your journey. Learning how to troubleshoot, you learning how your application works, how it is supposed to work, how your code functions is very important in order to fix problems. And that will inevitably, become a thing in your process. So that's why we're learning the basics first, to understand that when something breaks, how do we fix it, and where do we have to look to fix it. So we're starting with learning the basics of HTML, CSS, as well as JavaScript. After we've covered the fundamentals, we're going to look into how do we structure our code, how do we publish our code online using GitHub and Git, and how do we use version control. So as you're starting to build your application, you're not going to build your application in one go. You're not going to sit there in like one sitting and be building your entire app. You'll be doing this gradually. And as you will start to build specific functionalities, you're going to, start at a point where you're like, okay, I'm happy with something that I've made now. I now want to add a feature. But you might also be breaking a lot of things while you're adding that feature. So you're going to have to break it off into its own branch where you can then develop that feature and merge them together when you're done. All right. And that is where version control comes in. And after we've covered all of that, we're going to be breaking free from just using the standard languages. So breaking free from using just, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, because then we'll be building our tech stack. The tech stack is basically using a combination of different technologies that complement each other and that provide us all of the uh, components that we need to make our application fully functional, fully featured, as well as modern and easy to maintain and easy to kind of deploy online at some point. And this is where the build of our tech stack will come in. And then we'll actually be converting whatever we have built using basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript into using our framework that we've chosen. All right. And when we get to the point of actually wanting to deploy our application online, we'll also need to have a look at how do we do that altogether? What platforms should we be using for that? As well as making our backend work. So we'll cover the front end, which is basically what the user sees, and the backend, which is server functionality, as well as database information functionality, as well as things getting updated over time. So we'll cover these as we go as well. And there are, of course, a lot of topics that we have to cover in terms of like getting something online, because our application needs to be secure somewhat. If you have a user that signs up and signs into their account, they expect to see their information, not the information of some random user. And we have to make sure that all of that is done properly, that our application has some layers of security in it, that users can't, as they're logged in, that they can see any other user's data uh, while they are not authenticated as that user, and possibly add payments and like email notifications and these kind of things into our application. All right. And having said all of that, at some point, when we start to build our app, we will also be utilizing AI quite heavily, because at the end of the day, it really unlocks a lot of potential for developers, especially developers who are starting out on their journey, because it can teach you a lot about the code that you're writing, or maybe snippets of code that you found online, maybe you don't understand how they work. But also, with giving the right structure, giving the right work methodologies, it can create a lot of your application for you. However, we do really need to make sure that we set some guidelines, we set some rules, and we decide upfront what it is that we're going to build and how we're going to build it, and which technologies we're going to use, so that the AI doesn't make these decisions on our behalf and create something that might be broken to start with, or will be impossible to maintain over time just because of the choices that we kind of left the AI to do its own thing, right? Um, so hopefully this gives you a good overview of what it is that we're going to cover. So as you can see, there is quite a lot, and we're going to be doing that quite quickly. So we will have to move swiftly through the material in order to reach our like 12-week milestone. But I'm confident that we'll be able to get there. And if there are things that are left at the end of the 12-week period, we could always extend it by a couple of weeks to cover more material, or maybe some other configuration items that you guys want to cover. All right. Okay, so let's move on. So I've kind of explained the big picture of the purpose of Humble Devs, the purpose of this course. Again, it's going to be based on like creating an actual app. So think of something that you would want to build for yourself. Don't make it too complex. Don't make it too big. Make something that is functional at first and fully featured, and afterwards, fully featured meaning that you have some basic functionality, but you can also like authenticate. You have a database that stores the information. You have your front end, you have your back end. You are able to publish this on a service online. You have a domain for it. Um, all of that requires quite a lot of work, requires layering on many different um, apps, integrations, services, systems. And then after you've managed to consolidate all of that together, it will be very easy for you to add additional functionality to your application, because the rest of the foundation is already in place. If that makes sense, right? So yeah, project oriented. I'm trying to build a community of people. So if you enjoy the journey, or like enjoy what you're seeing, feel free to tell other people about Humble Devs, and hopefully you'll have more people to collaborate with while building out your project, and you might even be building a project together with someone else. We'll also be focusing on using mostly free tools and solutions. There will be no tool or solution that we will need to pay for as we go forward with building using the tech stack that we're going to deploy. We might look at some applications or platforms that do provide some paid services, and we'll explain why you might want to choose for these if you're going to build an app of a specific kind or size. But we'll get to that when we get there. Initially, there is not going to be. You shouldn't expect that there is going to be anything that you have to pay for in terms of services or tools, right? Um, with that, hopefully, you'll be able to build your confidence as well as understand how a modern web app works from start to finish, not just writing a bit of code and testing that on your computer or getting it to display on your browser and thinking that you're done, basically, right? And one very important thing, and this is also a part of a big part of why a lot of people stop learning to code or trying to build an app, is because when you start, you have this enthusiasm or like, okay, I'm going to build something or I'm learning something, and you start on the journey, and there is like a lot of knowledge, and most of the starting knowledge or like basic knowledge is very easy to understand and easy to like put into practice. At some point, you will reach a barrier that's going to be something difficult for you, something that's going to be hard to get into, and then at that point, a lot of people drop off, right? Just like I mentioned before, a lot of people think that this is too complicated, this is too hard, I have no idea what I'm doing, and generally they also don't really have someone in their vicinity to kind of guide them through and help them to break through that barrier. So with Humble Devs, we're trying to basically catch you as you go down and kind of, move this squiggly line all the way from down here to up here, where you can maintain momentum and maintain like some level of knowledge, as well as guidance, uh, so that you can reach the finish line. All right. Okay. So covering the tech stack just a bit, because I did get asked about this a couple of times. So I was like, okay, let's cover it from the beginning so that people might want to do a bit of research on their own as they go through the course. We're going to start with just covering the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Because again, it's very important to understand the fundamentals before we start using any tech stack. Because if we're going to use, or we're going to stick with Next.js to build our app, um, and Next.js itself is built and is utilizing these languages. However, it's going to make it so that it will do a lot of the work on our behalf. It will also make a lot of choices on our behalf. And when you're building something and it breaks or it doesn't work as you expected, or there is some behavior that you don't understand where it comes from, if you don't know the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you might be, encountering something that's very, very simple and trivial to deal with. But if you're just looking at like Next.js bits and pieces of code, um, you might be missing a lot of context of what's actually going on in the background, or how it is making something appear or do a specific action on your app uh, with just a couple of lines of code. Because at the end of the day, what it's doing is it is kind of creating a level of abstraction where you write a very simple line that does a lot in the background. And therefore, you need to understand a bit of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in order to mitigate these issues or create a different solution or make it work in a different way if that's something that you need, right? So our Next.js is going to be the front end and back end. Again, we'll cover front end and back end a bit later. We're going to use Supabase for database as well as authentication. We're going to be hosting our application on Vercel, which is a platform created by the team that creates Next.js. So they pair very well together and makes publishing our application very, very easy. And all of these, so Next.js is open source and fully free. Supabase and Vercel both provide a very generous free tier that you can like launch any app that you would want. And as long as you're not having thousands users visit your app every single day, you don't have to worry about payments, at least not as you get started, right? We might also be including something like Upstash later, as well as adding Stripe for payment, and also adding maybe some emailing service in there, which we'll get to somewhere at the end of our journey. And why do we choose this tech stack specifically? Again, we're trying to build something very quickly. We're trying to build something that functions, that's easy to maintain, that's easy to deploy. And we're not going to focus on learning all of the code. At the end of the day, if you really want to learn all about HTML, all about CSS, all about JavaScript, then you would be better off doing like an actual like development course that will have you studying HTML, CSS for weeks and months on end, and equal amount of time for JavaScript or even more because it's far more complex and it has like a lot of functionality that HTML, CSS, of course, does not offer. However, we're trying to cover the basics, so learn the 20% that we actually need, and then actually build our application. And for that, Next.js provides us with a lot of very important functionality that you don't really want to bother with building yourself if this is going to be your first time building um, this kind of project, right? Like routing. At the end of the day, every kind of function that you create will need to be routed through your app. This is done automatically just by creating the correct file structure for your project. So this is really, really simple. Server-side rendering. So basically, your pages will be pre-rendered so that they perform a lot faster, and search engines can find your content easier. Static site generation, again, pre-build your pages and optimal for performance. API routes, again, very good that it does it on your behalf, so that you don't have to, don't have to script out something in your front end and then connect it to your back end separately. So for Next.js, we're going to be building the front end and the back end together, which makes it very easy for our API routes to be connected. Next.js also has an image optimization plugin that you can use where it will automatically reduce the sizes of your images for your app to make everything load faster, as well as lazy loading, where it would only load the information and images that are in view of the user, and not load 50 or 100 images the moment that someone goes to your website, for example, right? Supabase, as mentioned before, is going to be used mostly for its database as well as authentication. So instead of building our own authentication method or allowing a user to only authenticate using their email address and password, Supabase will allow us to have people sign in with Google, with Outlook, with Apple. And this is very powerful that it provides this functionality out of the box where we don't need to script all of that out ourselves, right? It has many, many more functionalities, especially edge functions, which we will most probably have to use for our application to allow for interactions, allow for user updates to be pushed through our app to the database, which we'll get to again towards the end of building our project. All right, now switching gears just a bit. If you're going to learn how to code, if you want to build software projects, even if AI is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting on your behalf, one of the most important skills that you will need to have and master is being able to type, and preferably touch type, so without looking at the keyboard. And to learn that or to practice and get better at it, I highly recommend going to KeyBR. So it's short for keyboard. So keybr.com, which is this website right here. And I'll have these in the Discord server as well. The great thing is about this website specifically is that it doesn't just give you a random string of or a random like sentence or a couple of sentences for you to type out. It will give you some random characters, and it will basically measure your accuracy. So how many like mistakes do you make and how quick are you able to type these out. And when it does that, it basically builds a profile specific for you. So it will kind of highlight all of the letters and letter combinations that you're good and not good at. It will measure your speed, your accuracy, and all these kind of things. But eventually, it will, after you've covered all of the letters, it will kind of grade them for you, whether you are able to hit these accurately at all, if you are able to do this quickly, and generally, it will focus on like making you practice key combinations that are used in a lot of words. So if you do this and you practice over time, your typing speed will be greatly increased. So I highly recommend for people to start practicing this. The second thing is, which I don't have a slide for, is we're going to use a method, or at least we're going to try to use a method that is scientifically proven to increase the retention of information. because we're going to be covering a lot of information in rather like a short period of time. So these two methods are active recall as well as a spaced repetition. So active recall just means that when you hear or read something new, that you just kind of actively recall it for yourself. So you say it to yourself basically in your own words, which will help you to remember that concept or that piece of information that you just learned. So that's active recall, and then spaced repetition just means that you're going to have to repeat that information again within a relatively short time frame. So within like a week or two after learning it, so that it stays with you for longer. So basically, for each consecutive session, so today is class one. During class two, we're also going to start with repeating the information for class one. So only like the things that are relevant for building the app, not this whole story that I've been telling now. And then for class three, we're also going to kind of review what we covered in class two before we start with the class three content. All right, to help you guys make the best out of the information that you're going to be receiving. So let's start with HTML, which is not a programming language. So HTML stands for hyper text markup language, which we'll cover in a bit. But your HTML is basically the chassis of your application. So I like to give a metaphor of a car. So before you have any panels, before it has paint, before you have seats, before you have any kind of upholstery inside of the car, this is CSS. This is HTML. So this is just the foundation, the chassis of your car. Because with HTML, we don't really care about how it looks. We care about the structure. We care about the fundamental foundation as well as the semantics of HTML, because it means a lot for the app as well as for the browser that will have to display our application. All right. So HTML, hypertext markup language. So this is the language and pretty much the only language that's being used nowadays to create content for the web. So any website ever since the HTML was created somewhere in the early 90s, started using HTML. Currently, we use HTML5, which has features like displaying images, uh, having video being displayed, and deciding how big, and having like standard controls for audio and video and these kind of things, which did not exist in old versions of HTML. Not that it's new, so HTML5 has been out for quite a long time, but it keeps on evolving over time. Again, so it's the standard markup language for the web, and it is mostly there to do two things: create structure and content for your app. And in order to understand, firstly, how we get this data, I'm going to switch gears and talk about the client server model first, and then we'll dive into HTML. All right. So let me just grab my drawing. Just making a bit of space. All right. So when we are talking about the client server model, what is a client? You're sitting at home, right? And you have a laptop, right? You might be visiting a website. You might be going to YouTube, for example. Okay. Your laptop is going to be connecting nowadays, at least, mostly through Wi-Fi, to a device that is called a modem. Okay. So most of these nowadays, most of people have these, of course, at home, right? You have some lights. The same goes for your mobile phone. So if you have a mobile phone and you're gonna also be connecting this to Wi-Fi, you might have a TV in your living room. Again, all of these nowadays are connecting to the internet, right? And when you do that, right? So we're going to start with building a web page just locally on our computer. So everything is going to be in here. But normally, especially if you're trying to get something off the internet, right? So you're going to YouTube on your computer or mobile phone or any other device. That device is going to send a request to your modem. The modem itself is, of course, in your house. So all of this is your local network. Okay, so that's your local network. To be able to reach anywhere else. So if you're trying to watch a YouTube video, the YouTube video is of course not available in your own house. So you're going to have to connect to the internet to actually get there. And to do that, you're going to be utilizing an ISP, which stands for Internet Service Provider. And the ISP is connecting your modem to one of their routers. And the router here, this circle with the arrows, is basically your gateway out of your house. Okay, your gateway out of your local network. That router of the ISP is itself also connecting to many other routers all around the world, right? And that's basically the internet. Not in its complete picture, but we'll get there in a second. Your request to go to YouTube will go to your ISP. The internet service provider at some point is going to be, okay, you're trying to watch YouTube, it's going to be up here, it's going to go down there, and from there it will most probably go to many other routers. At some point, though, it will reach a server that will house the video that you're looking for. So firstly, it will house the website. So if you just go to youtube.com, you will get a website with a whole bunch of videos. So your request will reach here. The server is going to be like, okay, you're trying to reach YouTube. Great. So it will start to send you all of that information back across the way where it came. And then from your modem at the end to your computer, right? The same thing will happen when you click on a video. You'll request again, okay, now I want to see that specific video. A request goes out, that information gets sent back to you at some point. And this is the internet at the end of the day. It's nothing more than millions and millions of devices being connected to one another through all kinds of different gateways and routers that make up the logic of how do you find that information that you're looking for. Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about youtube.com, right? So that's just a domain name. It's not an actual address because this server over here, this one that gave us the YouTube website, needs to have an address. Just like each and every one of us, we live in a house. We have a zip code. We have a house number. We have a building number for people to be able to find us. The same thing exists on the web, right? And at some point, when we go further in our app and we want to host it online, you might want to buy a domain name for yourself. So let me just show you that if you want to, let me try to make this bigger just so that you can read it. So if you want to find what is the address of youtube.com, it's easy because in your terminal, so this is the console of Mac, you can use the terminal on Windows. You can just ping, so this will just send out a request to the name that we're looking for, just to try and find if we can actually get back the address of whatever we're trying to look for. So we're just going to ping YouTube dot yeah, .com. And very quickly, as you can see, we're getting I'm just going to stop this because otherwise it will just continue. You see that the actual address of youtube.com is this, right? So this is called an IP address. So this is the specific address of a server that can actually reply to our request and give us the youtube.com webpage, right? So let me just get rid of this. Okay, and go back to our drawing very quickly. All right. So, again, very important to understand that uh, also for YouTube, as you can imagine, YouTube doesn't use one server to provide millions and millions and billions of people around the world with the videos that they want to watch. So for these servers from YouTube, there are hundreds of thousands of them out there in the world, right? The networks, so the routers and the networks of the internet that connects us together, understand that, okay, if you're looking for YouTube, you are logged in from any city in the world, it will know that, okay, YouTube will most probably have a very, very long list of servers that can respond to your request, and it will automatically find the one that is closest to you, so that you can have a very quick experience. Because if you go to YouTube, it opens almost instantly, and to be able to provide that kind of speed, the server cannot be a very, very far distance from you, because all of the data that you're seeing on your screen has to be sent back to your device, right, across that entire road that it has taken to reach the server. All right. And this is called, this is firstly, like, you have different data centers that house these devices, but within each data center. So if you have a data center that is in the city where you live, for example, even there'll be thousands of servers that can respond to your request. And then before it will actually get to the server, there will be like some other device in between, which will be a load balancer. So the request will come here, and it will send, for example, each 1,000 requests to a server, and then the next 1,000 will go to a new server, right? And then the same for the next. So it will be able to load, to divide the load across multiple devices instead of having one server reply to all of the requests. So if you have an application, or you hear of an application crashing because too many people visit it, that's what normally happens. So if I would launch an app that I'm expecting only 10 people to visit, and all of a sudden I have 10,000 people visiting my website all at once, the chances are that the server that is trying to reply to all of these requests and deliver people all the information that is available on my website, that the server will not be able to meet that demand, and it will crash, so it will stop working. And that's what that means. So hopefully you understand now the client server model, so yourself as a user, and then what happens from the perspective of someone who's delivering an application or a website or a service, because that is where the difference comes in when we talk about front end, which is again the client side, and the back end, which is the server side, right? So the client is here asking for information, and the server is here delivering information, and there is a clear separation between the two, in many different layers. All right. So let's move back to our slide. And, all right. So, okay, sorry, just checking my audio very quickly. We're still live. Um, we've just explained the client server model. And you've seen that, okay, after each, for each web address, so for each DNS name, right? So the name of a website, there is an IP address, which is made out of a set of numbers. And the requests themselves have also some logic to them. So firstly, the scheme. So every website will start with HTTP. Nowadays, start with HTTPS, which stands for secure. Back in the day, so a long, long time ago, when the internet just became a thing, there only used to be HTTP. And all of the information that was being sent out, so from client to server and back, used to be not encrypted. So all of that information was just sent out as that information. So if you're sending an email, the email itself, all of the text, your email address, all of the information that accompanies it would go across that whole network that I drew out and reach its destination. At some point, with security concerns, with hacking becoming a thing, the S was added for security to make sure that whenever we send out information from a client to a server, as well as from a server to a client, that this is encrypted in a way that it cannot be read. And using modern technologies, both devices have a key that can help them to decrypt that information, actually read it. And without it, the information will just be a very long, like random string of characters. Then we have the host name, which is the actual domain. We have the path. So as we will build our app, you will see this very clearly, where we have, like, for example, a main page. And then we have a subpage, and then within that subpage, you might have items. And this is where then the query comes in. So what are you trying to show? For example, you're trying to show information of a specific user that has a specific ID. And then you might have some fragment data in there as well, right? Now, moving on to the structure of HTML, which is quite simple. Again, HTML is not a programming language, so it doesn't really have a lot of complex topics to cover. But it's just made out of elements. But these elements are very, very important. So first we have a declaration of HTML to tell the browser, because that's what you're using, like that's what you're sending your HTML to a browser, right? Like Chrome, what I'm using here. To tell it that you have sent it an HTML document. There are other types of documents, of course, as you will see very shortly, for the browser to understand that, okay, it needs to render this or read this as an HTML document. You have your HTML tags, which will house your entire page. You have a heading that will, house a whole bunch of information. Again, we'll cover that in a bit. You have the title, which is what you will see as the title of your tab, generally speaking, right? And then you have the body, which will be the content. And the structure of HTML is very, very important for a variety of reasons. So this is more of how it looks like within a code editor. Again, we'll jump in there in a bit. But the importance of HTML and its structure is for giving a semantic meaning to all of the things that are in your page. Because the header just make sure that, for example, search engines. So if they are looking at your page, they would know that, okay, you're using the header tag for this bit. So this is what your page, or like, your website, your application, or if you're like posting a blog post, what it is about. Navigation, for example, these are the navigation tabs. So if I go here to this website, this is the nav, right? So these are all of the navigation elements. Your main, so this is going to be the main body of your page. If you have like specific articles, so if you're writing an article, for example, in a blog post, this will be the article. You have sections, so if you have different sections of your page, you can then make these into separate sections. Aside for like a sidebar or additional information, and you have a footer. So generally, the footer will house your copyright information, contact information, or anything like that. This is also being used for screen readers. So a lot of people who might have bad sight, or have difficulties navigating websites for any given reason, they normally use screen readers, which are built into most modern browsers, that will read the content on their behalf, tell them the things that are available for them to click on. So this is also like very important, why you need to use all of the proper tags for the different pieces of content in your app, because this is very useful for desktop users, mobile users, any kind of user who's using your application or website, right? So this is really, really important. And there are applications, we'll cover these later, that will even grade your application or your website based on the best practices for deploying HTML. When we're going to be moving on to building the website using our framework, you're going to not be writing a lot of it yourself. Actually, you're going to not be writing most of it. However, it is very important for you to keep in mind that you look into the structure, that you check whether it's being used properly, and that you can change these or adapt these to improve the stability, speed, as well as readability of your app in general. HTML also has a lot of input methods, so ways for a user to interact with your website, right? So you can have input fields, you can have buttons that can do specific things, or like to submit something, right? And there are a whole bunch. So there are a whole lot of input types. So you can have text, email, and all of these. So whenever you're using it in like a form, so basically this is just a form, and then inside the form you will have a whole bunch of elements. If you're asking an email address, right, dictating that, okay, this specific entry has to be an email address, a user can't just enter, for example, a random set of numbers and for that to be accepted, right? So there is some kind of check that needs to be performed on these, and this is very, very important. So to make sure that you get valid data whenever a user is entering information, for example. And then you have a whole bunch of attributes, so you can name your fields, like we have here, for example. So this is like the first name field, and then you have John. So here, for example, you have the label. So this is nothing more than just a label within a form. And then we have the actual input field. Here it says that this is just a text. The ID is for a frame name, and then the value currently is just showing a value, but it's basically just indicating that, okay, you need to put in a name in here, but you can also use something else like a placeholder text, which will make it generally grayed out by default. You can make fields required, so someone cannot submit a form if they have not filled in that specific field, but also based on logic. So if you have, for example, a choice that someone needs to choose, if you have a checkbox and you're like, okay, you choose one of the two, then based on the checkbox, you can also say that, okay, a field will now become read-only because the user cannot change this or choose this anymore, right? So all of these are just like, again, this is all inside of HTML. And this is going to be used a lot, of course, if you are expecting users to like log in or like fill out a form with some information, or even update their own information in your database in their account page, for example. Like mentioned before, HTML also allows for embedding of media. So you can embed images, audio, as well as video. And when we get to HTML, it will also be very apparent, or something that you will need to remember, that a lot of the tags in HTML, so if I go back a bit, are starting and closing. So we have a form, right? So this is a form that we're creating for the users. The form starts here, which is always for the HTML tag starting with a less than or like an arrow to the left, and then the tag as well as a closure with a larger than symbol. And to close them, that is the same, but the only difference is we add a forward slash at the beginning, and you can see this for the tag for paragraph. So this indicates this is a paragraph. Again, we have a starting tag and an ending tag. That doesn't exist for a very small number of tags within HTML. And one of them is the image tag. So if you're adding a picture to your app or website, then an image tag is auto-closing because it cannot really house any more information than all of the attributes of the image. So here we have a car. So this is a picture that might be there in a folder. And alt is an alternative text. So this is something that people will see if they hover over it. This is a description that they will be able to read if they're using a screen reader. And this is also something that the search engines will be looking for, right? Audio, so we have audio again, we have a opening tag, closing tag. For the video is the same. So here we can define a number of things, as well as for the video, we can define the size and how this is viewed, and even provide a thumbnail before the video starts altogether. Okay, so enough slides and presentations, and let's jump into the actual code editor. Right. So we're going to leave that for now. all I have here, so you can leave this. So this is the project that we're going to be working on, at least for myself. I'm going to be creating a Trello-like Kanban board, so it's a task board basically, which I'll show you in a bit. But if we have a page, so okay, let's start from the beginning. So in here, I'm using a Visual Studio Code, right? So this is something that you should definitely use. So I advise you, if you have not already, to go to code.visualstudio.com, download the Visual Studio Code for your operating system, and to start using it. Once we start using AI for generating our code and applications, we might be using a different code editor, but they will all be based on Visual Studio Code. So it will look and feel the same mostly. But for now, we're going to stick with this one just because we don't want to add a lot of complexity as we're just getting started, right? So inside of Visual Studio Code, all you do is basically just open a folder. There is not much more to it. So I have a folder in my user profile, and this is the folder that I have open in here. So you can just say open. You can just go to File, Open Folder, and then it will open that folder for you. So currently I have a folder that has also two other folders inside of it. That's why you're seeing First Pages as well as Kanban Task Manager. And if you are creating any HTML page, it is nothing more than just a document that ends with .html. So normally if you're creating a text document on your computer, you will have a document that has a name .txt or something similar, or like for Word, for example, you have .doc or docx. This is the same here. So these are just files. So if I look into my first pages, we have the first page document, which is again like .html, but it's just a document at the end. And then we have styling, which is for the CSS part. I have some HTML in here. I'm just going to explain a little bit. Actually, let me start with a new one, right? First page.html, right? So while it's empty, and this is also very important while we start with the basics. So we can get AI to generate an HTML page for us, but it's really trivial, and it's not something that we should even think about letting AI do for us. Because inside of Visual Studio Code, that's why you would use a code editor to create your like application instead of doing this in a word processor, for example, which is perfectly possible. However, in here, if I just type HTML, you can see that we have Emmet, which is basically a library that has a lot of standard blocks of code for most of the commonly used languages like HTML, CSS, as well as JavaScript, that are pre-made for us. So we don't even have to type these out. So I can tell you that, you need to learn that you have to start each HTML document with, the bang doc type HTML and have your HTML tags and headings, but there's no need, right? The code editor already does this for you, so there is no need for you to have to remember that I need to type all of this manually, right? And if I delete these, and I'm just going to type HTML one more time, because it's giving me options. So it's giving me a normal HTML, HTML5, which is the version that we are using nowadays, as I mentioned before, and then you have also XML. We're not going to be using XML, at least not for the moment. We also don't want to use plain HTML because there is no point to that. It's more for like legacy browsers if you're using a browser that was created before HTML5 was introduced. But again, we're trying to make a modern application, so we're sticking with HTML5, right? So this will give us an HTML5 boilerplate. A boilerplate is just an acronym to describe something that is already pre-scripted for you. That will give us the doc type already. It will say that, okay, the language of our application is English by default. You can set this to whatever you want. This will do two things. So firstly, a search engine will know what language your application is using, or this page specifically. But also, if I'm using a browser, and in my browser I have set my preferred language. And if I visit a website that also has that language available, um, then you have multiple languages in here. And the browser can then request the page using the language that I want, if it is supported, right? Without me having to visit the page first and then look for a menu where I can change the language. So this is where the language tag becomes important. Then we have the header, right? And the header houses a lot of information that is not visible. So nothing inside of the header will be visible on your website or page. So firstly, it starts with telling the browser, right? So everything in here is for the browser. What kind of character sets are being used? So this just dictates um, the technical term to describe the characters that are going to be used on this website. So we're just going to be using normal like English characters. So for that, by default, you use UTF-8. If you're using any kind of like a character of a language that doesn't use English letters, for example, whether that being like Arabic or Indian or any other language, you might use a different character set for that specific language, right? Then we have the metadata for the viewing. So by default, it will name the entire page viewport. And this is very important when we come also to CSS later on. And then it will say that, okay, all of the content, okay, will take the width of the device. So if you're seeing this on a mobile phone or on a computer on a big screen, the content will stretch across the entire screen and not be limited to like a small section in the middle, for example. And then it sets the initial scale to 1, which is just the normal viewing size. And of course, in your browser, you can zoom in or out into pages, and this will change the scale. But by default, it will set the scale to 1. And this is again for people who might be having some difficulty with their eyesight. They have, for example, their default scaling in their browser set to 2 or 3. This scaling will then adapt based on their browser settings, right? But this is what we're telling the browser to display as a default value, right? And then we have a title. So the title again will be visible as the title of your like website. First page here, and the body itself will house all of the content that's going to be visible on our page. So if I go back to this first page here, because it has already some elements in here, so we start with the body, and in the body we have a header. So I have a header which says that this is the starting part or the starting section of my page. We have a header which is in H1, and headers. So these are, if you're using a word processor, you would know this already. So these are like using heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and it will go down in size the higher the number is. So if I want to add a different heading, so let's say I want to add in a heading 2, again, I don't need to type all of this out. I don't need to do this and say, oh, I want H2 and open it and close it. I can just say, I want H2. As you can see, it already shows me all of the options, and it will create the beginning and the ending tag for me. All right. And then after that, so these are just headings. So this is just text that I'm displaying on my page. We have H1 and H2, right? And then we have nav. So we covered nav already. So navigation is basically the nav bar of your website. And something that we didn't cover are lists. So here we have a UL. So we have a UL starting tag as well as a UL ending tag. And UL stands for unordered lists. So this will be basically um, how do you call it? Like a list of dots, right? And if you want to have an ordered list, sorry, okay. then we create an ordered list, and this will be numbered. So it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you can also have depth in your ordered list as well as an ordered list. So both of them can support some depth in there. But this is how it looks like in HTML. So I'm gonna open this page in my browser. So I'm just gonna right click on it, and I'm going to copy the path. And I'll go to my browser. Again, this is all on my computer, so I'm not going anywhere. I'm not like going to type in a name of a website. So this is inside of my computer, and I'm just telling the browser, okay, I want to see this page, right? So here, this page has plenty of things just because it's important to kind of show these off. We had our H1 in here. This is the H2 that I just added. As you can see, it's by default a bit smaller. We have the nav, which has these two elements, right? So you have the navigation starts here, ends here, and then inside the navigation, we have an unordered list where we have, the first one is home and the second one is features. Uh, these don't exist, so these are just currently pointing to nothing, but that's fine. And as you can see here, these are bullet points, right? So these bullet points, normally in a menu bar, you don't see like any bullet points, and we get rid of these using CSS. So when we get to the styling part, we will get rid of like the bullet points. We can keep them, of course, if we want, but normally the menu will be up here somewhere. And then we really don't want these to be visible. And one very important thing that we need to say about HTML is that the we're not using HTML, pardon me, we're not using HTML to define how a page looks, because that's not important for HTML, all right? HTML needs only to worry about structure, content, and being semantically correct, right? And how the page looks is what we will be using CSS for. And I'll show you a very brief example of that in a bit, just to show you how powerful that actually is, right? So if we go back to the code editor here, the heading ends. So this is like the end of the heading section. We have some headings, and we have the actual nav bar. And then we have the main section of our website where we then also split out like sections. So we are saying, okay, this is a section on its own. It has a heading, it has a paragraph. Because why would we use paragraphs altogether? Again, where the look isn't important, but it's important to understand what difference it makes. So this is a paragraph inside of our code, right? If I'm coming in here, because again, it's about instructing the browser to do certain things, right? Or not to do them. If I'm like, okay, this paragraph is actually quite long. So yeah, okay, so I have a new page. There is more text here, right? And this might be like a couple of lines long, right? Would this now be displayed in this manner on the website or no? What do you think? I'm going to go back to my page. I'm going to refresh it. And it's not, right? So it's writing it just in one big section, right? Why is that? Because spacing inside of an HTML document is not important. So it doesn't matter how many spaces we put between like lines and whatever, it has no bearing at all on how this looks. So if I'm going to space this out even more, I'm going to refresh this, space does nothing for our page. So if I want to have this as one paragraph, but I'm like, okay, I do want a line to be between these, all I need to do is use a line break, which is BR. So this is a tag that doesn't need closing. This just indicates that at this point in time, so I can put it right behind this sentence, I want to continue on a new line. This is what I'm telling the browser, right? So after it reads this, it's like, okay, you need to now go to a new line and then display this sentence. And after this sentence, we're going to be using a line break again. Oh, need to take a space. Okay, and then display the one afterwards. Okay, so if I save this now and go back to my page and refresh, you see that it has now broken up these lines. And if I want to create more spacing, like again, you wouldn't normally like have to do this, but I can do more line breaks, and each one of them will just tell the browser to skip another line. So if I go back here, and now I've created a space. However, if I really want to create a new block, so if I'm going to remove all of the line breaks from here, and I'm going to just duplicate this entire block. And I'm going to put it immediately after the first one, right? Because these are two different paragraphs, the browser will automatically give them some space. So it will automatically skip a line between these two pieces of content. So both of these are separate paragraphs. And again, using CSS later, we can also style paragraphs and give them different spacings as separate elements within our page, right? We're closing the section. We have an article. Again, this is just an example. Again, we're using a heading. We're using a paragraph here. We have a form that you're seeing here. So we have a place to enter a name. Again, there are values already in here because we are providing a label. And within the input field itself, we're setting the value here to be this or that. All right, so if we change that and we go to our page, it will change the value that's being displayed in here. So after someone fills out a form, you would normally want to get that data. It is something that we'll do later because that's something that we will need JavaScript for. But I've just created a button that sends an alert, and an alert. So this is also very important for you to understand that everything that we're doing in here is providing instructions to the browser. All right. So this is a button. It says that on click, right? So once a user clicks on it, right? So this is an event that the browser will be listening for. Okay, and this is again a part of HTML as a functionality. We want to alert. And alert just means that the browser needs to throw a pop-up to the user and do whatever it says between that function. So there's a function here. That's why we have a open bracket and a closing bracket here. And if you hover over it, it tells you that this is a function. It's an alert. You need to provide a message and of any kind, basically. So here we have hello world. And the button it says, so as you can see, the button starts here and this is the end of the button. So this is the closing tag of the button. And between the starting tag and all of the attributes and the closure of the button is whatever will actually be written on the button itself. Okay. So if we go back to our page and we're going to click it, it will throw the alert. So this is what the alert does. Again, we don't have to program this. We just tell the browser, okay, alert the user now and tell them whatever is in there, right? So whatever we have provided is input. So it says hello world with an exclamation mark. And that's exactly what we're seeing here, right? So if we say, hi there, dev, and we save it and we refresh our page again because we need to get the new data that should be in here, and then we click it. It says, hi there, humble dev, right? And again, this is just to show you all of the, not all, but like most of the functionality that you'll be interacting with using HTML, so that you understand where all of this functionality and where all of these features come from. We have some more paragraphs. This is the end of the main. So we're saying, okay, our main section kind of ends here, and this needs to be a bit more indented to be inside of here as well. Okay, we'll talk about indentation because it's quite important, especially when we start using when we start structuring the page, as well as when we start using JavaScript. So indentation, in very brief, just means that, okay, we have the body here. And as you can see, the code editor kind of highlights a line to guide us to where that goes to. And using different styles for the code editor, you can make it more visible and you can make it like colorful. I'm just using this as a default so that you can see how it will look for you out of the box. This is the end of the body. So everything that should be in the body should be indented. And indenting is done by tabbing. So if it's here, I press tab once and it will indent it one level. And then as you can see, we have a header, and everything that's inside of the header is indented as well. And this is very important as like the first layer of structure of your code, because it makes it very visible what part of your code is inside of here, right? And again, when we start working with JavaScript and we might have some long piece of logic, it's very important for you to be at a glance, be able to see where a function or a piece of logic starts and where it ends. Because normally you would even have things indented within that as well, just like we have here. So we have the header, so we have the body first, then we have the header, and inside of the header we have the nav, and inside of the nav we have this unordered list, right? So all of these should be indented properly. So even this, I should select it and push it forward because it's a part of the nav and it should be indented as such as well. So keeping this up for yourself is very, very important. You have plugins that will do this automatically for you when you save your document. I haven't bothered with that here. Just again, I want to give you kind of the out-of-the-box experience, and we'll be adding these as we go. But at the moment, it's not very important because we're not really doing anything super complex here. Moving on to, we've skipped the form. We've basically came to the end of the main. We have a footer. Nothing fancy. So we have a footer here. Right here that kind of shows like a footer, and you can normally would style this or place it somewhere on your screen using CSS. And actually this should not be here. My apologies. So we're going to take that again. Everything that we want on the page should be, of course, inside of the page and not outside of the HTML tags. Right? So the HTML tag ends here. So everything that we want on the page should be before it. And preferably the footer is, of course, like the last thing that you will have on your page. So we're just going to save that, go back to the browser, refresh. All right, so the footer is now here. And this is just an example. Actually, we'll add some images later, no problem. So this is an image. As you can see, it's broken because there is no actual file. We'll be adding these for sure. This is audio, so we're just saying we have some audio in here. You can link a file to it and then you can actually play it. But just having the audio in here, so we're saying we have an audio source, provides us with these playbacks. And again, these are all based from the browser. So we're just telling the browser, okay, here we have an audio file, and it will bring up these audio controls by default. And we can also style these. So this is how it looks like out of the box. If we want to have a different look and feel, or we might even want to disable some components of it, we can do that. But by default, it will just come up like this. The same goes for the video. So we're just saying that, oh, we have a video. The video has a poster, which is this specific file. And if the file would have existed in our project, it will show here a thumbnail. Again, we'll do that when we start building our app. So hopefully this kind of shows you what HTML does, how it works, how it is just a file that you're telling your browser to provide you. Because at the end of the day, these files are the things that you're getting whenever you're visiting a website. And in order for you to dabble with HTML, so I would strongly advise you to visit this website. So W3 Schools. Most of the online courses or tutorials will point you to the MDN website, but I find this one to be much easier to navigate. It's better structured. It's much easier to find the things that you're looking for. So just go to W3 Schools. So this is like Web3 Schools basically. And you can just click on HTML. And it will tell you a lot, like all of the things that you really need to know about HTML. And the good thing is that you can also say that I want to try this here. So it will open for you an interactive screen that you can use to test out different things. So you can add things in here. If we copy this, so on the left side you have your code, and then when you click run, it will refresh the page and display it over here, and it will add the paragraph. And you can basically just copy bits and pieces from here and add them to your playground. I do advise you to do this using VS Code on your computer, though, for you to already get in the habit of using VS Code and doing something locally on your computer instead of doing it here, right? So you can go through the introductions. You can like read up a bit about the basics. You can also go to the elements. It will show you all of the different things that we've covered in a bit. The attributes of these, you can, like, headings are not complex, but you can also look into styles, which is something that we will cover more when we dive into CSS, because you can style HTML itself, but it's something that we normally would not do. All right. And yeah, I see here that I left the style in here, which is fine. So the style sheet, so I have a CSS file in here, which I'm going to show you. It's very, very small. So all that it does is it sets the body. So everything that's inside the body. So if I go to this page, we have the body tag, which again, the selectors will cover in our CSS class. So we're selecting in our CSS file everything that's inside the body needs to have the color Dodger blue, and we're gonna give something that has the class a gray background, which we don't have in our page, right? That's why when I go to the page that I have locally on my computer, you see that everything is blue. However, if I would go back and I say that, okay, I'm going to comment out this piece, so I'm going to remove it. So this is something, so commenting out, you do, if you're on a Mac, you just go to align, you press command and / on your keyboard. So / is this symbol. And it will comment out that entire line, or you can select multiple lines and do the same. It will comment all of them out. So right now I'm going to comment this out, and the comment in HTML is basically this structure. So it starts with the less than symbol, with a bang or an exclamation mark, two hyphens, and then at the end 2 hyphens, and then the larger than. So this becomes green, indicating that, okay, this is now something that's not functional within the page, so that the browser, when it receives this, it will ignore it. So it will skip this line and just continue. So if I save that now and I refresh my page, we will lose our styling, which is basically at the moment nothing more than just turning everything in the body blue, right? So that is now gone by default without any styling. This is how it looks like. And what the styling here does for HTML, so this is HTML styling, not CSS, right? Again, this is not something that we're going to be using for obvious reasons when we get to CSS, but you can. So you can say that, okay, I want to use this style on my heading, for example, and we can just copy all of this from here, go back to our code editor and say that, okay, this heading right here. So inside of the heading itself, we can provide additional attributes. So we are saying that, okay, we want this heading specifically to have a style. And that style applies to the background color, right? So not the text, but whatever is behind the text. And this is powder blue, and this was what was in there. But again, you can see that the code editor gives us a whole color scheme to work with. We can use the sliders to choose whatever color we want, but we can also provide an actual code in here to define a color, right? So if I save that and I go back to my page and I refresh it, you see that the background of our heading has become powder blue, right? And I can invert it to say that, okay, I don't want the background color, but I want only the color, right? So this is the text itself instead of the background, and save that. And now it has changed the color of the text instead of the background. Again, we'll style using CSS for many different reasons, which we'll get to during the next session. But you just need to know that if you want to do a bit of styling on the fly, you can, right? And if we're gonna get rid of this now and save it again, like this is doing nothing more than changing the style, but you can see that the styling is now overwritten. And this is one of the primary reasons why we don't do it in HTML, because then it will nullify whatever style we're trying to enforce using CSS. So everything now has become Dodger Blue, as it says in our CSS. However, this one, because it is styled individually inside of our HTML, it is keeping that. And because most of the HTML or most of the pages that we will be using in our final application will be automatically generated or will have information that's populated from a database or various different sources, we really don't want to, we're not even going to have the chance to do this in HTML at all. And even if we would, it will be too cumbersome to manage. So that's why we do all of the styling inside of one CSS file that will apply for our entire app. All right. So, okay, we covered styling, formatting. There's a lot. So I advise you to go through these and play around with them a bit for yourself, just to kind of discover how HTML works and all of the different things that it allows you to do, including like forms, as I've already shown you, including, for example, building something like a table inside of HTML, lists, and all these kind of things. One special mention, which is a div. And divs are something that we will use quite frequently, but it's something that's not visible in your page. So a div is just basically a container that has no semantic meaning at all. And a lot of people like build their entire website just made out of divs, which is like very bad practice. So what you want to do is just to use a div with a specific class for specific formatting or specific styling, but still retain all of the semantics of actually using HTML properly. Right, we'll jump into these later, but in case you see websites that have divs in them, just this is just for containerizing different elements of your or different parts of your page without providing any semantic meaning whatsoever. One other thing that I really want to highlight, because we've covered the client server model, is opening your developer console. It's something that we will do a lot during our learning process and building process, validation process, and publishing process, and afterwards as well. So it's a really important tool for you to learn and master as quickly as possible. So you can, I'm using Chrome, you can right click inside any page and just say inspect. You can also press Control or Command F12 on your keyboard and it will pull it up as well. I'm just going to do this here. And this will pull up the developer console. And it will show you everything that you get. So let me go to the network and I'm going to refresh this page. And just by refreshing the page, we have requested here this website, right? So again, like my browser went out to the internet and got this entire website, and as you would have seen, it was like super quick. But it provides a whole list of documents, and this is how this specific website is built. And at the end of the day, we have a whole bunch of files here that we can even browse through. So there are some CSS files, as you can see here. There will be like fonts, which are the ones here. So if you want to display a specific font, you can provide that as a file. There are different JavaScript files in here that will do like various different functionalities within the website. And there will be an HTML file or multiple ones, depending on how the website is built. We also have a favicon, which is the icon that you're seeing here on the edge of the website. And this is how it gets there. But the thing that is very important in kind of like this website is quite beautiful. It's very simplistic, but it has a really nice layout. And you can click on this button that will select an element for you. And if you hover over anything, it will firstly show you a lot of information regarding that specific element that you're hovering above. So it says here, for example, this is an input. It has a specific class. So this class is most probably being used for styling purposes. It has a specific background, which is white. It has some padding. And we haven't talked about padding and these kind of things. We'll do that when we get to CSS. But any element in the page, it will tell you all of the information that the browser has about that specific component, right? As you can see, there is a div. So if you're looking at the pop-up over there, you see that it starts with div.w3 something something, right? So this is something that's being containerized with a specific ID, again, most probably for styling purposes. But the div itself doesn't have any semantic meaning. So most probably the things that are inside of the div do. So this is a paragraph. As you can see, it starts with a P. This is an A, so this is an anchor, which is a link to someplace else. And so will all of these be. So it's also very good practice for you at this moment to just go to a website like W3 Schools or any website that you like and kind of browse around using the developer console and try to see if you understand. And not only that, the very powerful thing about this very specific thing is that everything that you have here. So I just clicked on this anchor and it will bring me to that specific place inside of the page here, right? So you're seeing here that, okay, it's saying, okay, you have an anchor, which has this address. So it's going here. It has a class that's being used most probably for styling. It has a style that's inline. So it's giving it a margin. And it says learn HTML, which is exactly what it does. Because this is local information, so this is client information, I can't even change that. So humble devs, I'm gonna just press enter and you can see that it changes the label here. Now, this website, of course, is only changing for me here and now. If I would just refresh the page, it will go back to whatever it was because it's pulling the information again from the server, and the server, of course, has learn HTML in here. But as you can see, whatever information I have here, I can manipulate for myself. So if I go in here and I select the same element again, and there is not only that, so this is the HTML, but also down here, we have the style. So we can see all of the styling that's being applied to this very specific element, even the color. So if I want to change this color to a more fitting purple humble devs color, I can do that. And like that, you can manipulate pages and you can change a lot about them just by playing around with all of these attributes. But it's also great for learning because it shows you how websites that you like the look of are actually built, what colors they use, how they are structured, and it's quite fun to do this, especially when you're like learning these fundamentals, right? So I advise you to do that. So this is going to be your homework for class 1. So go to W3 Schools, go to HTML, browse a bit, play around with HTML using VS Code, as well as try to alter the website in like various different ways, even changing the size of the buttons or like the fields and whatnot, and try to get the feel of how the layout of website works. Because when we go to CSS, we're going to be doing that much more. Now, the last thing that I want to do before we close for today is I promised you, or at least I told you, that I'm going to show you the difference between not using and using CSS on a page. So for that, I'm going to go back to my code editor and I'm going to say that, so this page is not going to have styling. So I'm going to get rid of that. Not going to have JavaScript. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to save it. And I'm going to copy the path, right? And again, I'm just going to paste this inside of my title bar. And you can see that this is my Kanban board, so my task board. And the functionality that it has, so it has 3 different sections, right? 3 different columns. And it has a way for you to add new cards, right? in each one of these. And this is how it looks like just using HTML. So there is no CSS, there's no JavaScript. The difference with just HTML, so no styling, and using CSS to like fully style it is I'm just gonna uncomment the style. So this is a CSS file that is in here. So I'm just linking it here. So I'm creating a link, and the relationship is going to be a style sheet. So this is just indicating to the browser that, okay, for this HTML page, I have styling. It's not inside of this page itself. However, it is inside of this document that's external. That's why we are providing the name. This file could also be in a separate folder. Then we have to kind of browse to it. So we have to like either go up a level or go down a level and find the file. But for now, it's in the same folder. So we're just naming the file, and that is sufficient. So I'm going to save this, go back to the browser. And when I refresh, the HTML will all still be there, just like it is now, but it will be styled using CSS. And this is the difference that CSS will make for your app if you style it properly. So you can give it a background. This is gradient in this respect. It gives the columns the visual that you're seeing here, the cards. So adding the card functionality in here is very different than how it was just by using HTML. The cards themselves, so all of these were visible in the HTML page, but they weren't, of course, laid out in this specific fashion. It gives it also this hover effect and the how do you call it, like the shadow effect under the cards. So in all of this is achieved by utilizing CSS for the styling, right? So we're gonna end it there for this first class, and then during the second session we'll be diving into CSS and understanding how all of this comes together in combination with HTML, and how all of the different selectors work, and ways to style our app or page, right? So thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next stream. Right? Take care. Bye bye.